Does this engine compare well to the Powerstroke? No, not really. The Powerstroke kind of wiped the floor with this engine, in my opinion. What is going on today, guys? My name's Alex. Welcome back to the channel. Today we have the highly requested 7.3 liter Godzilla naturally aspirated V8 in this F250 Super Duty. And behind it, we have a heavy loaded 14,000 pound trailer, and we are going to be towing this thing down the highway to see what this Godzilla engine is all about in the real world. But first, we're gonna take this truck in the shop. I'm gonna give you 3 reasons as a heavy duty mechanic why I think this engine is going to be a good towing engine. Struggling this time. Well, she's finally started to warm up, which is why I broke the shorts out today for you guys. But more importantly, this is a 2023 F250 Super Duty with the 7.3 liter Godzilla V8 gas engine, which I'm excited about. Now, this is the 3rd week I've had a F250 Super Duty on the channel, but I thought this would give us a perfect situation to do a direct comparison between the 7.3 gas engine versus the 6.7 liter Powerstroke, which I had on last week, and we'll be towing the exact same load with this truck as well. Now, some of you guys may think that comparing the 7.3 and the 6.7 is like comparing apples to oranges, but there is a very important reason why I want to compare these two engines, which I'll get into later in the video. But first, I'm going to pop the hood here, and I'm going to tell you guys 3 reasons why I think this big displacement 7.3 liter gas V8 is going to be a good towing engine. So this naturally aspirated V8 produces 430 horsepower as well as 475 pound-feet of torque. Now, if you're more interested, I did do a full in-depth dive into this engine maybe a month or 2 ago. So I'll link that video down below if you guys want to hear more about that. But there are a couple things to unravel when it comes to those power numbers. First of all, when it comes to horsepower, some people were a little bit annoyed when this thing first came out that it only had 430 horsepower. But in comparison, we look at the 3.5 liter EcoBoost that has north of 500 horsepower. So I guess I could see why that would make sense. But we have to keep in mind that this engine is rated at a much higher duty cycle, meaning that this engine will be able to take a much higher load for much longer duration than something like the 3.5 liter EcoBoost, which is still a powerful engine, but in terms of its duty cycle, it would not be able to maintain the same load or the amount of load that this thing will be able to maintain over a certain period of time. Now, secondly, when it comes to torque, yes, this thing is rated for 475 pound-feet of torque at 4,000 RPM. However, at 1500 RPM, this engine will make 400 pound-feet of torque, and so down low, this thing has lots of grunt, lots of power, low in the RPM band, which you really want to see when you're towing. And honestly, that's no surprise. It's a large displacement, naturally aspirated V8. These things are usually torque monsters because there's just instant power with that big displacement. Something like the EcoBoost will not necessarily have an advantage of because it needs to wait for those turbos to spool up to really get that power. So this thing is going to have tons of power down low, which is exactly what you want to see when you're towing a big load. Now, the second reason why I think this engine is going to be a great towing gas engine is because Ford claims this thing is actually probably underrated from the numbers at factory. Now, there does seem to be some evidence for this, and one case, Blaine Ramey's and Paul's High Performance Garage, they dropped a crate 7.3 into a Mustang, and it ran under an 11 at the quarter mile. So they put the thing on the dyno, and apparently it ran about 500 horsepower and 500 pound-feet of torque at the rear wheels on a dyno. And taking driveline loss into consideration, they rated that engine at the crank at about 575 horsepower and 575 pound-feet of torque, completely stock. So there may be some truth that these engines are actually a little bit more powerful than they appear. Now, the third reason why I think this will be a good towing engine is the simplicity Ford put into this. This is just a pushrod V8. In fact, it's the first pushrod V8 Ford's made in over 20 years, which is saying something. And they've left out things like direct injection or the potential headache with direct injection, going with just a simple port injection fuel system. There's no cylinder deactivation. So they've really just kept things simple with this engine, and hopefully that simplicity translates into reliability. So maybe I lied, maybe there's 4 reasons why I like this engine when it comes to towing. Now the 4th reason, final reason, is how strong this bottom end and these internals are in this V8 here. Now Ford once again claims that this engine was actually over-engineered for the application that they put it in, but once again there seems to be some evidence to back this claim up. Retired former head of Ford Racing Brian Wolf squeaked out almost 800 horsepower out of this engine with completely stock internals in a naturally aspirated form, which is impressive. Now, what's even more impressive is when he strapped a supercharger to this engine, he was able to make almost 1,600 horsepower with basically completely stock internals. So maybe there is some truth to Ford claiming that these internals are a little bit over-engineered, because making 1,600 horsepower out of a stock engine is something a little bit unheard of. So I think this engine is a good, strong engine when it comes to that bottom end. So hopefully that will translate into good towing. Those are my 4 reasons why I think this 7.3 liter Godzilla V8 engine will be a good towing engine. Now, enough talk. Let's back this thing out. Let's go hook up to the trailer. We'll take this thing down the highway and see if that is the truth. All right, so we are making these towing tests a little more scientific. We have the exact same weight we had last week, 14,000 pounds. We're gonna use that same weight for every single 2,500 I run. That way it just gives us a really good base comparison with the exact same trailer weight, and trailer setup. These blocks are in the exact same position as they were last week with the Powerstroke, with one exception. I actually moved them a little bit closer together. Someone mentioned in the comments it'd actually be a more secure load if they were closer together, and I do agree, so I've done that. Now lastly, before we hit the road, let's measure our rear axle squat here. So that's about 40 and a half, we're about 43, so 2.5 inches of squat. So this thing dropped quite a bit. All right, let's go for a second measurement here. That seemed a little far off. Yeah, exactly, so 41. So about 2 inches of squat. The Powerstroke squatted 1.5 inches. I don't know why this squat's a little more. The blocks are in the exact same forward position as they are. Who knows, maybe someone could tell me if this is a different suspension setup in the Powerstroke. I think it wouldn't, but let me know. We're all strapped up. I'm excited to get this 7.3 on the road, rolling down the highway 110 kilometers an hour, and we'll see what this thing's all about. Okay, so right off the bat, it's very noticeable. The diesel just had so much more torque down low out of the hole. This thing, it just takes more revs. It takes a little bit longer to get this thing to move, but that's exactly what you'd expect with a gas engine versus a diesel. So we're gonna jump right on the highway here, and we're gonna compare our 60 kilometer an hour to 110 kilometer an hour acceleration test. I'm gonna drop the hammer at 60 kilometers an hour, and we will compare it to the Powerstroke, just to see how much more power that Powerstroke has than this big displacement gas engine. So, turn in the corner here. We'll wait till we get our straightaway. 58, 60, all right, to the floor, here we go. So I mean, definitely a little bit slower. I'll have to review the footage, but I think the Powerstroke's got that by a long shot.
So I slowed both clips down just to give you guys a better look. Unfortunately, the Powerstroke, the kilometers just wasn't up on the dash there. Regardless, the Powerstroke actually didn't get a good start. It only dropped to like 6th gear, where the Godzilla dropped to 3rd gear. But you guys can hopefully clearly see that the Powerstroke is just climbing speed much quicker, and it gets to 110 kilometers an hour much faster than the big 7.3 gas engine, to no one's surprise.
All right, so we set our speed to 110. We're actually doing 109 right now, but that's okay. We'll just let this thing cruise. We'll let the truck do what it wants to do down the highway. And I'm excited to see how this thing does in comparison to the Powerstroke. It'll be a fun test. I'm excited. So we're 35 kilometers into our little journey here. We got our first slow incline. It's slow, but it's quite long, as you guys will see. The Powerstroke crushed this. I believe it didn't even downshift. We are in 6th gear, revving at just under 3,500 RPM to maintain 110 kilometers an hour. Oh, just a downshift. Now, in terms of gearing in this 10-speed transmission, 7th gear, which is what we are in right now, is actually 1-to-1. 8, 9, 10 are what's called overdrive gears, and 1 to 6 are underdrive gears. The Powerstroke almost never had to get out of an overdrive gear, which is really impressive. Now, I expect this truck, and that's what I've been seeing, is it is hanging around 1-to-1 and underdrive gears more frequently. And when we get to some bigger hills, I wouldn't be surprised if this thing's revving close to 4,000 or 5,000 RPM to keep our speed. So that should be interesting. Overall, in terms of comfortability, this thing feels totally comfortable with the weight behind it. It is the exact same chassis, same truck as the Powerstroke, so that hasn't changed. But the engine, yes, it does have to rev quite a bit more, but in terms of comfortability, feeling safe, she's got her under control, not too worried whatsoever. Actually, no, I take that back. One thing that is scaring me about this truck, and we're 43 kilometers in, is my fuel economy. 31.6 liters per 100 kilometers used so far in that 43 kilometers driven. That is a lot of fuel, and that is, I mean, some quick math here. Actually, no, I was gonna say it's double the Powerstroke. Not quite. Powerstroke ended at 18.2, I believe. But still, that is significantly more fuel used than the Powerstroke. Obviously, we're not done the run yet, and we'll keep an eye on that. But here's why I keep comparing this truck to the Powerstroke, because I think it's a very important comparison. There's a very specific reason why I wanted to compare the two, because this engine was actually developed as a direct secondary option to the 6.7 liter Powerstroke for a number of reasons, which we'll talk about. The 6.7 liter diesel engine will without a doubt be a much better towing engine than this 7.3, but no longer are the days of reliable diesel engines, unfortunately. These modern diesel engines, they come with quite a bit of potential headache, and that is all because of their strict emission regulations, which every single modern diesel engine now is regulated to have. So I work on diesel engines for a living as a heavy duty mechanic, and without a doubt, the number one issue we see by far is after treatment related issues, and that is what is really rendering this whole trucking industry somewhat helpless when it comes to reliability. Now, for example, this whole unit right here, that is just the after treatment system. It's large, there's many sensors, and as you guys may be able to see, this white stuff here, that's diesel exhaust fluid leaking out of this after treatment system, and this after treatment system needs to be replaced. And for this cement truck, it's going to be about $20,000 to replace just the after treatment system. So Ford felt, and correctly so, that a lot of people didn't really want to deal with the headache of the modern diesel engine, nor the expense of the modern diesel engine. First of all, it costs another like $12,000, $14,000 just to get it. And then any after treatment system repairs, those are usually very expensive. Again, I know firsthand, they are not cheap. And that is the main reason why Ford went with the 7.3, is to give their consumers another option when it came to mid-range towing, anywhere from 10 to 15,000 pounds. They wanted an engine that was reliable, non-diesel, that could compete with the 6.7 liter Powerstroke. So that is why I think this comparison is quite important, because with 14,000 pounds, we are right in that butter zone between 10 and 15,000 pounds, where a lot of those large campers kind of lie. And I think people are questioning, do I need to spend $14,000 on a diesel engine to tow that? Or can I buy a large displacement 7.3 liter gas engine and get away with it just fine and have a good towing experience also? Now, this engine does feel like it has a noticeable lack of power in comparison to diesel. For example, this little tiny incline, we're down to 7th gear, where the Powerstroke would just boost up and it wouldn't even switch gears. It'd be in 10th gear and you just have more boost going in the engine from that turbo. This is a naturally aspirated engine, obviously, so we don't have that option. So we are downshifting in order to maintain 110 kilometers an hour. Right now we're even in 6th gear, just trying to make it up this hill. So there is a lot more revving going on than on that Powerstroke. That Powerstroke just seemed to just cruise and drive, and there was absolutely no sweat. If it did have to downshift, it would maybe downshift to like 8th gear and just keep on chooching, where you definitely notice this engine is working quite a bit harder to maintain our speed of 110 kilometers an hour. But it is not all bad. Like I mentioned, peak torque at this engine is 4,000 RPM. However, we get 400 foot-pounds of torque starting at 1,500 RPM. So it has a very broad torque. torque band, meaning anywhere between 1,500 and 4,000 RPM, you are getting a lot of torque getting down to the wheels. So you are getting quite a bit of power down on the road, keeping this thing pulling pretty strong. All right, here is our biggest downhill portion of our little route here. I'm excited to see what this engine does. We're already well past 110. Let's see if this thing will downshift anytime soon. We may even have to hit the brakes here. I'm not really sure. Oh wow, yeah, we are definitely revving up here. Okay, 5,000 RPM in 4th gear. Jesus, this thing is not afraid to drop those revs. But we are slowing down at 5,000 RPM. Beautiful day out there, folks, as you guys can see. We almost had the leaves popped. Anyways, she's held in her pretty good at 110 at like 4,800 RPM, 4,700 RPM. Definitely a little more eventful than the diesel, that's for sure. Holy smokes, good for her. Good for the Godzilla. Just letting her rev. Wow. And we're almost at the bottom here. All right. 4th gear, wow. All right, the good news is that this truck held us at speed, which is always what you want to see. But I mean, that was not drama free. There was quite a bit of revs there, and I'll explain to you why the diesels are just so much better at engine braking. The compression ratio on the 7.3 liter Godzilla is 10.5 to 1, and the compression ratio on the 6.7 Powerstroke is 15.8 to 1. Now, that gives the Powerstroke an advantage when it comes to engine braking, simply because of the higher compression ratios. With a higher compression ratio, it takes more force to drive that piston up and compress all that air, so you're going to get more engine braking, and it's going to hold the truck or slow the truck down much more effective than a truck with a lower compression ratio. So that is one advantage that diesel has over the gas engine, clearly, as well as the exhaust brake, which this truck does not have. This is a perfect example of the torque at 1,500 RPM. We're able to stay in 10th gear, which is a very strong overdrive gear. going up a slight incline, something that the 6.4 HEMI is just not able to do. It's rarely in 8th gear, which is an overdrive gear. So it just goes to show at 1500 RPM, this thing can really rack up some torque and keep those wheels turning. Again, here we go, slight incline, we're in 10th gear, heavy overdrive, and you can just hear that engine bog down a little bit. And that big displacement, 7.3 liters of displacement, just pushing those wheels forward without having to downshift, which is kind of impressive with 14,000 pounds behind her. Another thing I really quite enjoy about these trucks, these Super Duties, is the hitch, or the hitch receiver, pardon me, in the back. I just think Ford did a really good job with that. So new in 2023 for the Super Duty lineup is this new hitch receiver design. Ford really beefed this baby up. When it comes to an F250, the max towing ability off this receiver here is 22,000 pounds, which is quite a bit of weight. And then if you go up to the 3500s or the F350s, you can tow up to 30,000 pounds off this receiver here, which is kind of unheard of. So they've really beefed that thing up, which I really like to see, because it just gives the driver more confidence. I mean, a lot of times people are going to just put loads on these trucks and not really know exactly how much weight is behind them. So it's good to know that you have a really strong receiver and nothing's going to go wrong in terms of this component here. All right, we made it to our halfway point. Truck's running really good, actually. I really like this whole trailer setup right now. The truck is basically level and the trailer is basically level with a slight incline in the front, but that's exactly what you want. Hubs are all feeling nice and warm, but not too hot. This gas engine is having to work quite a bit harder, but I don't think she's really straining too bad. The first time we actually don't have to use the cat scale over there and weigh it, which is nice because we know exactly how much weight we have and we know exactly how much tongue weight we have. So it's kind of relaxing. I can just kind of sit out here, take a breather. We'll get back in the truck and we'll head on home. I might even grab a coffee over at good old Tim Hortons. Gotta love it. Okay, we're gonna jump back on the highway. We will do another 60 to 110 acceleration test. We'll put the pedal right through the firewall, at least I'll try to do it, and give this thing a little bit of a run for its money. And again, we'll compare it to the Powerstroke on this second attempt here. All right, so we're just sitting at 60 kilometers an hour here, 59. All right, 3, 2, 1, and to the floor. Oh, she's struggling this time. $110, there we go.
So once again, I slowed the clip down by half just to give you guys a better idea of the difference. This time I actually have the speed up on the gauge clusters on for the Powerstroke, so you guys can see the comparison directly. And it's just super obvious the Powerstroke just kind of blows the 7.3 out of the water when it comes to towing this load. But I mean, that's what you would really honestly expect with this thing pushing out over 1,000 foot-pounds of torque, more than double what the 7.3 liter engine is rated for. So it really is no surprise, but I still think it's cool to see a direct comparison of the difference in terms of towing acceleration between these two trucks.
Now, one thing we have not talked about yet is the gearing options with the 7.3 Godzilla engine. The 7.3 liter Godzilla can be optioned with 430 gears. This truck unfortunately only has the stock 373 gears with the locking rear differential. Not a bad setup. I actually really like 373 gears. I think they're a perfect combination on a heavy duty truck between like fuel mileage and towing ability. So unfortunately we don't have the 430 gears, but I think these gears will serve us just fine. And speaking of gearing, one thing I really like what Ford does with these Super Duties is they put the axle tag right on the driver's side door, so you guys can find out really quickly what gearing your truck has. This one has 3E, which means 373 gears with an electronic locking rear differential. We are approaching the biggest hill on the course. and I'm excited to see this 7.3 liter Godzilla engine working. But first, we're coming down in the valley, so let's see how well this truck can hold us once again at 110 kilometers an hour. All right, 6th gear, 3,500 RPM, okay. 5th gear, 4,200 RPM. 4th gear, just about 5,000 RPM. She's really holding us though, once again. All right, we made her to the bottom of the little valley here. And now the real journey begins. Let's see this thing work. All right, we're in 7th gear, 109 kilometers an hour, 2,500 RPM. 6th gear, 3,200 RPM, 106K, still dropping speed. 5th gear, 4,000 RPM. Finally picking up some speed. Oh yeah, she's gonna sit right there, 4,000 RPM all the way up. Let's go. Oh yeah, well, I mean, I guess that makes sense because the peak torque is right at 4,000 RPM. So she's just sitting in that exact peak torque band, pushing all that torque down to the wheels. Love to see it. Oh, upshift, didn't even need it. Very cool to see. Not bad, not bad. I thought she'd be cruising at like 5,000 RPM. Not true. Not too bad. There you go. Wow. If we had the higher gearing, the 430 gearing, I bet you we could have rode that out in 6th gear and not even had to drop to 4,000 RPM. But maybe I'll get the chance to test that one day. Now, we have been talking pretty favorably about the 7.3 liter Godzilla V8, and rightfully so. I think it's actually a pretty good engine, but no engine is perfect. And as of recently, there have been a lot of controversies, issues surrounding the lifter failures on these engines. So basically, the rollers and the cam lobes, the hardening on them is starting to flake off. And once that happens, it's kind of game over, as well as getting metal kind of all throughout the engine. So not a good situation at all when it comes to these lifter failures. Now, when I did my full review on the 7.3 liter engine, I went into quite a bit of depth on this, but what caught my eye is that there seems to be more failures on box trucks or RVs, and some people may think that's because they're under heavier load, and potentially, but what I think is potentially a culprit, again, this is just pure speculation, is the idle times on those vehicles are a lot more than your pickup trucks. And with this engine, Ford has a variable displacement oil pump, and apparently at idle, that oil pressure is at like 7 or 8 PSI, so not very much. And some people, again, speculate that there is just not enough oil pressure getting those lifters during idle, and that is what is causing that problem. Now, again, pure speculation, I don't know, I'm not an engineer, but to me, that kind of caught my eye. And so if you guys do have one of these trucks, probably try and limit your idle time. You should always try and limit your idle time anyways. It's really not good for the engine, but especially now that we have these lifter failures. And I guess that would be my second complaint about this engine here, is why Ford would go with a variable displacement oil pump. I mean, usually manufacturers go to that style of oil pump to save fuel economy, but we've already seen Ford not go with cylinder deactivation, not go with direct injection. So why are they trying to save fuel when it comes to a critical oil pump? I'm not an engineer, I don't work for Ford, but to me, it smells a little fishy. I think they should have just gone with a normal fixed displacement oil pump and not really worry about saving maybe 1 mile per gallon when it comes to these engines. They're already gonna suck fuel. It's a 7.3 liter displacement V8. So this truck we're driving right now has a max towing capacity of 17,700 pounds, so almost 18,000 pounds, which to me, I mean, I could see it, yeah, like we got 14,000 pounds behind us and she's working pretty good. You know, we got a little incline. This is just the way of the road with this engine. Little incline, and we're at 3,500 RPM just to keep 110 kilometers an hour. It's just how it is. It's no different with any other gas engine. It'd be doing the exact same thing. But I guess the big question in this video is, when do you need a diesel engine? That is the big question. And at 14,000 pounds, it seems like this engine is plenty capable of running it up and down the highway with some hills and stuff thrown in there. She definitely is going to be working a lot harder than your Powerstroke, but at the end of the day, it's gonna tow it, and it's gonna tow it just fine. I feel completely comfortable. I feel like there's plenty of power when I need it. It's not like I'm incapable of towing anything up these hills. We are maintaining our speed very well, up and as well as down, even if we have to climb much higher into the RPM band. We are coming to the end of our loop here. We're at just about 172 kilometers, and we are averaging 28.6 liters per 100 kilometers. That is a big number in terms of fuel economy, and I guess for miles per gallon, that is a very small number. If you were towing a fifth wheel camper trailer, acting like a sail, that number would probably be quite a bit worse, maybe 10 to 15% worse. So yes, this engine is perfectly capable of towing these weights and doing them fairly well, but be prepared, you will not be passing very many gas stations. Now in comparison, the Powerstroke is much more fuel efficient. For example here, like just the acceleration is just, it's there, like, it's like, that's my foot almost to the floor. You know, so she moves, like it'll tow it, but you know, you're gonna have to put your foot to the floor or close to it to get it to actually move at a half decent speed, where the diesel, yes, there is some lag there, but once that turbo is fully boosted, like you're moving pretty good. So it just depends what you are looking for, you know. If you're towing every single day at a pretty heavy weight, I would highly recommend getting a diesel. And just dealing with the headache of a modern emission systems, odds are if you're running heavy weight day in, day out, you're gonna be okay. For those who are looking to just tow not so consistently, but have a somewhat pretty heavy towing load of, you know, 10 to 15,000 pounds, this engine will do it without much issue. So we made her back to the shop all in one piece. We'll get this thing unloaded with the old cat there, and I'll give you guys my conclusion when we get this thing back in the shop. Should you be buying a diesel, or is this gas engine going to be good enough for you guys in your towing applications? Well, it comes down to application and what you actually need the truck for. In my opinion, if you are towing more than 15,000 pounds somewhat consistently, I would highly recommend getting the Powerstroke. It's just going to be an easier driving truck day in, day out, and it's just going to be so much more stress-free. If you guys have 15, 16,000 pounds of weight you need to tow every so often, maybe 5-10 times a year, like a heavy fifth wheel camping trailer, this 7.3 will do the job for sure, but it is going to be a little bit more of a struggle when you are towing down the highway at speeds or going up hills or down hills. Where I think these 7.3s are gonna shine over the diesel is, let's say, in fleet applications, people who are looking to put these trucks to work day in, day out and are not going to be towing those big numbers. In that case, you're not gonna have to deal with the headaches of a modern diesel engine, those modern emission systems that can literally fail anytime, anywhere, for any reason. This truck, this engine is going to be a more reliable option for those types of situations. Does this engine compare well to the Powerstroke? No, not really. The Powerstroke kind of wiped the floor with this engine, in my opinion. Yes, it's plenty powerful. It'll get the job done, but that Powerstroke, it just pulled and pulled and pulled, and there was zero drama. It just got on the road and just kept on driving, where this engine, I could feel it starting to struggle and really having to up those RPMs to keep speed. The Powerstroke is night and day a better towing engine than this 7.3. So in a direct comparison in terms of these engines in towing performance, the Powerstroke is by far a better towing engine. Now, just because the Powerstroke kind of wiped the floor with this 7.3 engine doesn't mean it's a bad engine. In fact, I think in terms of other gassers, it's probably the most powerful in terms of real world performance. Obviously on paper it is also, but it's got that big displacement, it's got that really good low end torque, that low end grunt, and so it is a good towing engine. Just if you're looking to compare it to the Powerstroke, which I did, you're going to be a little bit disappointed because it's just not even in the same realm. If you did like the video, don't forget to leave that thumbs up, guys. And if you like cool stuff like this, don't forget to subscribe. I don't know what we're going to have next week. I'm hoping for like a 1500, maybe even another gasser in terms of 2500s. That would be fun, but we'll have to wait and see. Either way, we'll be towing next week, so that should be fun. But enough of me. We'll see you in the next freaking video.